This maybe a tricky start for the market opens for Sony. How are investors going to take it? What is the bigger news here?
Well, that really depends on how much emphasis you put on the PlayStation division for Sony, which really has been the key driver for it. It accounts for about 30% of its sales. I think a lot of investors, a lot of analysts do see it as the all-important business line, and in that case, it is bad news. Sony cut its fiscal year forecast from 14.8 million sales to 11.5 million. It's holiday quarter, key time to sell those consoles. It did worse this holiday quarter than it did a year ago, so it isn't actually moving in the right direction. And the Sony CFO, in comments after the earnings, he did say the supply and logistics crunch is going to continue through fiscal year 2022, which is impacting Sony in a very significant way.
Vlad, the supply and logistics crunch does seem to have been particularly hard for Sony. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, it actually comes down to the per unit situation with the PlayStation 5. Sony cut its forecast for sales, but it increased its operating profit for the gaming division because it costs so much to ship the console. It really is a very large console, along with the Xbox from Microsoft, which is an issue that Nintendo, for example, which is reporting earnings later today, doesn't face with a smaller, physically smaller console. So Sony is coming up against some real basic physical limitations there.
So, Vlad, it seems iPhones and Spider-Man rescued the quarter. What's the outlook for the current year?
Right, exactly. The Spider-Man movie has been phenomenal. It did $1.3 billion at the box office in the previous quarter. It's now at $1.7 billion. It's a money printing machine. iPhones, they set new records for Apple earnings, and the supplier for the camera and the imaging chips in iPhones is Sony. That's the key supplier. But for this quarter, Sony did say that Chinese smartphone manufacturers are ordering high-end chips, high-end imaging chips, at a lower pace than the company anticipated. So actually, Apple's competitors aren't keeping pace, and that's going to affect Sony's performance in this current period.
So what's the company planning to do to counter Microsoft's big acquisition of Activision?
It announced its own Activision, its own acquisition, which is Bungie. But actually, the scale of difference between the Activision takeover at $69 billion and the Bungie takeover by Sony at $3.6 billion shows the comparative resources that Microsoft and Sony have at hand. Microsoft can literally throw money at making its Game Pass subscription a success, whereas Sony, being a more diversified business, having image sensors, it announced it's going to get into EVs as well, which is a really capital-intensive business line. It can't afford to spend as much money. So Sony is betting, number one, on first-party games and services, which it has as a strength. And also, Bungie is a company that is well known as one of the better performers in terms of games as a service. So Sony, the CFO said it wants to reach more customers on non-PlayStation hardware with the Bungie acquisition. So that's going to be key for it going forward.